You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode. Before we get started on this episode, here's a not so short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster or the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak with a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's courses on Udemy or Skillshare, and you can find out more about those at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley, and we have my wife, Cassandra. We're getting closer to dead middle of summer.
Oh, yeah.
I guess summer's technically just starting doesn't it start the 23rd or...
Yep, June 22nd to be exact, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, but it's plenty hot is
yes.
my point.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very hot. And we're also talking about a hot topic because this is something that everybody's talking about, everybody thinks they need, and yet very, very few actually understand how it's supposed to go.
Exactly. So today's topic is the importance of an SPC after toxic mold removal.
Yeah.
What's SPC mean?
Well, it's nice that I have a cheat sheet, but it's a small particle cleaning. But explain to me why everybody is so crazy about this thing.
I don't like to say this because I know a lot of fellow professionals listen to the podcast, but I feel like a lot of people, especially in the last, 4 or 5 years, have jumped on the mold bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a lot of people out there trying to profit from it. And obviously, I've been doing this for decades. But the SPC is kind of something that, a lot of people believe if you had mold remediation done, even if it was done properly, the reason you're still sick is because you needed to do an SPC.
But what is an SPC and what's the purpose of it?
So for our listeners, to explain this, we have mold, and toxigenic mold creates or produces and releases mycotoxins. The mycotoxins, now I'm not saying mold can't make you sick, because it can, but for the most part, what's really making people sick is the mycotoxins. Those mycotoxins, once they're released from the mold colony, can end up anywhere. My clients have heard me say this. You can compare it to like a snake. Let's compare, mold is like a snake. Are all snakes venomous?
No.
Okay, but toxigenic molds can produce mycotoxins, so that would be like a venomous snake. When a venomous snake bites you or releases its venom, it's a separate entity from the snake itself.
Is that the same as porcupines and quills?
Exactly.
Or is there nothing in the quills?
No, I use that analogy too.
Okay.
And my point is for our listeners is it's a totally separate entity. That's where I bring up the whole porcupine thing. When a porcupine releases its quill, it can be anywhere.
Yeah.
Just kind of like venom can.
Okay.
But the venom, you're not going to probably come across it like you would a porcupine quill.
But it has a different vehicle of activation, right? So the toxic mold, because only toxigenic molds can release mycotoxins, right?
Well, that's the only ones capable of even producing them.
Okay, so
So like a dog cannot produce venom.
Yes.
Make sense?
A garden snake.
Well, a garter snake.
Is it garter?
Exact,
Not
yeah.
garden. Oh.
but they cannot produce venom.
So a garter snake cannot produce venom, but a rattlesnake produces venom.
Exactly.
But the venom has a different vehicle of hurting a person than the bite.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. But the venom is transferred through the bite.
Through the bite. So again, the toxigenic mold, when it's being threatened by whatever means, starts producing the equivalent of the venom in the form of mycotoxins, and they're in the air.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yep.
And it spreads it everywhere, whereas the black mold might just be on sheetrock in one room. But it's still sending out mycotoxins that could literally go everywhere.
And that's where the quill from a porcupine is a better analogy.
Okay.
Because the reason I don't use a porcupine with my initial analogy is all porcupines have quills. Not all molds are toxigenic.
Correct.
A snake is a better analogy for that. Just so our listeners understand, mold types are allergenic, pathogenic, and toxigenic. It has to be a toxigenic mold species in order to produce the mycotoxins. But going back to what I was saying is, the porcupine, the reason that's a better analogy is once the quill is released, it can be anywhere.
Correct.
It's the same with mycotoxins in a home. So going back to, you have a toxic mold infestation, you hire the proper professionals, even if they do everything to IICRC standards, those mycotoxins are likely spread throughout your entire home.
Because as they did everything to IICRC standards, as the mold was
prior to them being there.
Oh, okay. Because I'm thinking as they're killing the mold or whatever they're doing removing the mold is having its dying breath by throwing out mycotoxins.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is the mycotoxins could have been released by the mold colonies well before the professional came in.
See, I thought the mold has to feel like it's under threat to...
Yeah, but we don't know because, the mycotoxins won't talk to us.
This is just a hypothesis right now.
It can feel under threat maybe by air pressure changes. We don't know. But going back to what we're just talking about, if a professional if none of the mycotoxins were released and they were only in, let's say, the laundry room, the professional should be doing everything to make sure they should have containments, negative air, that those mycotoxins do not leave that containment. My point is the mycotoxins are, the horse is already out of the barn. By the time the professional gets there.
So then this is an important question because I think that because people are hearing small particle cleaning everywhere they go, and the sense that I get from what people are hearing is it makes sure... An SPC makes sure that everything's gone. That's what I'm at least hearing. It makes sure all the mycotoxins are gone. What I'm not understanding is the timing of when the SPC should be performed for the exact reasons you just stated.
After mold remediation.
Oh, okay.
Because let's say that for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that the toxigenic mold colony is only in your laundry room. If you're assuming that no mycotoxins got released, I would never make that assumption.
Okay.
If you did the SPC prior to remediation, that's like trying to stitch up the wound if you have an internal bleed. Before you stop the internal bleeding, you already stitch it up. Like, you've got to stop the bleeding first.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So I know you said what an SPC is, but a lot of people seem to think that they can hire a carpet cleaning company and that basically an SPC is just a deep clean. Can you differentiate for me? Like, how is the SPC different from if I hired a carpet company or a cleaning company to come and do a deep clean in my house?
Well, my simple question to our listeners, if they asked me that question, is does your carpet cleaner understand mold and mycotoxins?
That's a good point.
Probably not.
Probably not. They have no idea what condition. They have no idea how to create the environment in which to perform an SPC to you.
Yeah. And I'm sure they don't have experience. Even if you hired the best cleaning company out there, house cleaning services, they don't know where the mycotoxins could be. How do they know where they're at?
Okay.
Are they in porous surfaces like your couch, your mattresses? What about your personal belongings? What do you do about your kitchen table? There are so many variables. I don't think even a lot of IEPs understand.
So walk me through how an SPC should be handled.
So it's not first and foremost, I don't give every step that we do.
Okay.
Not even to a client that's paying me. I give them the basics. because for proprietary reasons, we all have different things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
We have different ways we can see how efficient our SPCs were. But what needs to be done is very different for every home. Very different. If they're going to, fix your rotator cuff on your shoulder, it's pretty standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know any home out there that has the same exact things in the home, meaning personal belongings. I don't know any home that has every person in the home has the same health conditions. So my point is it's different for everyone. An SPC can vary from something as simple as you leave everything in your house, and then we come in and we say, okay, you have to get rid of this, you have to get rid of that. Or it could be, it could be something like we're doing a remediation project, and then the SPC after, everything's already out of the house. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. But then, so is the point of the SPC to clean everything that is in the house?
For the most part, yes.
Okay, and to clean it with using chemicals and items that get rid of mycotoxins, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Which, to kind of go back to your question, there are some things you can't keep in your home. But the point of the SPC is to get rid of the mycotoxins. Well, if you have, mycotoxins spread throughout your entire home, there are things you cannot keep, like fabric couches, mattresses, things like that.
So when you're doing an SPC, it sounds like because mycotoxins can go everywhere, you're not doing an SPC for 2 rooms of a house. You're doing an SPC for the whole house,
exactly.
Correct? Oh, okay.
Yep.
It's a whole house thing, which means it's going to be expensive.
Very.
Okay.
It's very expensive.
Okay.
And I've had clients ask, and once again, I can't just give you a price, but for the most part, you're probably going to pay $5 or $6 a square foot.
Wow. Okay.
Now, if that's a furnished home, that will change versus a home that's empty. Because an SPC in a home, like if I did an SPC in our home, could you imagine?
No, so much stuff in it.
But think about me doing an SPC in our home when it's empty.
Oh, yeah, that would
be much easier.
But then, so let me ask you about SPCs in a house where they take all their belongings out. Doesn't it defeat the purpose of the SPC if you're doing it on an empty home and then they bring all their mold impacted stuff back in?
Well, that would be pointless.
Yeah.
So I think what you're getting at is so we go in, we have the clients remove everything, we do the SPC, and then they move everything back in?
Yeah.
No, we never recommend that.
Okay.
They take those belongings and put them, in a storage container or another place. Sometimes it's in a garage. But then they have to go through everything wherever they have stored them. They've got a HEPA vacuum. They've got to do the damp wipe, the dry wipe. That's what I mean by it's so complex. In a podcast episode, I can't just give a general, here's what you need to do. But when it comes to the SPC, you bring up a good point. For our listeners, don't have an SPC done and you move everything out to a storage container and then think once the SPC's done and PRV testing's done that you could just move all your belongings back in, because that would defeat the whole purpose.
Correct.
You're bringing all the mycotoxins back in.
But I guess that's the part where I have some questions, because if somebody, it seems like just on social, when people are talking about SPCs, it seems like people are wanting SPCs before they even want remediation.
Yeah.
It almost feels like people are looking at SPC as or with remediation. Does that make it I don't know. There's this weird thing where people are all about the SPC, even if they haven't done remediation. Why do you think that's happening?
Because I think there's a lot of IEPs out there that don't know what they're doing.
Okay.
And if you're somebody that's profiting off of the SPC, you're going to sell whatever sales pitch you have. But you have to deal with the source, which is the mold colony that's producing the mycotoxins, before you ever even think about an SPC.
Correct.
That's why sometimes I have clients that they're like, well, we'll get all the mold remediated and then we'll have you come in and do the SPC. I'm like, okay, so what did you do to make sure all the mold was gone?
Correct. It would seem to me that there's a lot of testing and PRV testing and after mold remediation that would need to be done to verify that a client is ready for an SPC.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're not going to go down that rabbit hole because that
that's a whole
That's
other
a
deal.
whole nother episode. But I guess my whole point is there's certain steps that need to be taken before you even get to the SPC. But one thing I want to address with an SPC, and I see this all the time on social media, you have to throw away everything. Well, if you didn't address the mold concern and you just threw everything away and bought all new stuff and brought it back into your home.
Oh, now you have new furniture with new mold issues.
Exactly. So that's why it's so important to have somebody that knows what they're talking about. You can ask me any question about this, and off the top of my head, I know it. And I don't expect everybody to know that, but every situation's unique. But on the other hand, you have to have somebody that understands this. And we have a lot of IEPs out there that think they do, and they honestly have no clue.
Well, and are there any belongings that you would say prior to doing an SPC just absolutely cannot come back? I mean, I'm just thinking about books and I'm thinking about kids' stuffed animals. I just think, are there certain items where you go, no matter how much we clean it, we cannot guarantee that won't have mold associated with it?
Yeah, or mycotoxins.
Yes.
So there's a few things that we look at, and we look at how porous something is. I always use the smack test analogy. If I smack this desk, it's going to hurt my hand.
Okay.
If I smack our couch, it's
cushiony.
Yep, it's so porous that a bunch of stuff will come flying out of it. Skin cells, allergens, all sorts of things. But for the most part, the things you cannot keep is a mattress, fabric couches, stuffed animals. You can try to clean them. You obviously don't want to do that in your house. But the simple answer for a stuffed animal is get rid of it. And remember, I have a document, it just reminded me of this, that I think is like 95% completed.
That's right. Of things, personal items.
Yeah. Of what I was creating it for a digital product or something.
Something. But what about books?
So books that's a difficult one because, once again, every situation is different. There are companies that actually you can send your personal belongings to and they'll deal with them.
Okay.
They have ways they dry freeze things and have processes. But at the end of the day, like, you have to assess everything like a book. How much is that book worth to you?
Okay.
And you have tons of books.
Tons of books. I mean, and I just think of things like, I'm sure things like degrees are protected because they're behind glass, usually in a frame. But there are birth certificates. There are identity documents that you just put in some drawer somewhere. So even those have to be looked at before doing an SPC,
Yeah, and
correct?
at the end of the day, for our listeners, I know it's not always as easy to do it as it is for me to say it, but you should just get a new birth certificate. You should get a new degree. Like, those are the easiest ways around it.
And or get digital copies of everything. I mean, we live in a very digital world. But the one thing I think people are going to wonder, and this is where I hope you go a little bit deeper, because at the end of the day, everything comes down to how much does it cost, right? And I think a lot of people think, oh, so you're going to charge me $20,000 for mold mitigation. Just throw in the SPC in that. Can you just talk a little bit about the price of an SPC and how it is separate and different from the cost of mold remediation?
So mold remediation compared to an SPC is, for me, in my opinion, is way simpler than an SPC. Now, once again, it depends on the home. If it's vacant, that's different. But even if it's vacant, like, an SPC is not some simple process. Like,
correct.
We're addressing the walls, the ceilings, the HVAC ducts. Like, it's a very detail-oriented process, and it is completely different than remediation.
Okay.
And is it important? Absolutely, an SPC is important. But on the other hand, it's more important to have the mold remediation done and done properly.
Oh, absolutely. So do you think if somebody's doing an SPC before mold mitigation in a home for which there is an active mold colony, are they wasting their money?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, even if the mold remediation is done properly under containments, I still think that you're throwing your money away.
Wow. So what's your call to action for people?
Make sure you do the SPC after mold remediation.
There we go.
And you have the proper PRV tests for mold remediation. I mean, to me, it's simple, but,
Yeah. And it may be a really good idea for a digital course on the SPC.
Yep. And we, speaking of courses, we have courses. We talked about it last week, but, we have them on Thinkific. We're trying to move everything to Thinkific, but I still have a free course on Udemy, and I think one paid course, maybe two. I can't remember. We're in the process, in my spare time of switching everything over to Thinkific. But for our listeners, we have courses. We have things available. Go to our website, cnccontractorservices.com, and you can find them.
Awesome.
All right. We appreciate all you listeners. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you go to our website at cnccontractorservices.com and sign up for the mold investigation checklist. Again, go to cnccontractorservices.com and get your free mold investigation checklist today. You can also on cnccontractorservices.com find out more about Steve's courses and books and consultations. Once again, go to cnccontractorservices.com.